everyone, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Books Beside My Bed video. For those of you who are new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. And for anyone who is very familiar with the series, welcome back. I've had quite a few people join over the last couple of weeks, so welcome if this is your first Books Beside My Bed video. I'm pretty excited with how my reading went this week. This was my reading week from the 10th until the 16th of January. I read a total of 10 different things, although technically it's 11. There was a novella that was included at the back of a book, so technically 11, but I just counted it as one book because it was all in the one place. All of those were adult titles. I read a total of 2,572 pages and my yearly reading total is up to 22 books. The first two books that I'm going to talk about, I'm only going to mention briefly because I will have separate videos for these, and that is because I read books 5 and 6 in the Psy Changeling series, and if you've been following along for a while, you know I'm doing a series review, so each book is getting their own video. Book 5 is Hostage to Pleasure by Nalini Singh. This book is Dorian Christensen's book and his fated mate Ashire Aline, who is an MSci. We first met Ashire in book 4, and the beginning of this story does actually take place in the 4th book, so it probably helps to read that book before you read this one. And like all the Psy Changeling books, it is good to read them in order because there's a lot of overarching plot stuff that happens in the series. Ashire has been forced to work on a project for the Psy Council, and in this book she escapes, and she has no choice but to trust that the changelings will help her. In particular, she is taken under the protection of Dorian, who is one of the Dark River leopard shifters. However, Dorian is different to the other changelings in the pack because he actually can't shift into his leopard form, but he is no less deadly for it. Upon reread, because this is only the second time I've reread this particular book, I remembered how much I loved Dorian and Ashire and how well matched they are as a pairing within a book. They are both very strong characters in different ways. Of all the female side that we've met so far in the series, Ashire is less of a pushover at times and she really stands up for herself. So I really love this book, and this one was really cool as well because there is a child involved in a lot of the major plot points, so it was very exciting to reread this one, and I can't wait to talk about this book later in the week. I also reread Branded by Fire, which is book 6 in the Psy Changeling series by Nalini Singh. This is Mercy and Riley's book and it is hot. Unlike the other books in the series, this is the relationship between two changelings and it gets very sexy very fast in this book, and it's great. Mercy and Riley are very strong personalities, and I will have a separate review where I go into more detail about the story. Riley and Mercy have to work together to investigate the disappearance and kidnapping of a changeling researcher and the implications that that has on the greater world building. This one was really fun upon reread. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. And I think I forgot to say I gave Hostage to Pleasure 5 out of 5 stars on reread. Then I read Blood Heir by Ilona Andrews, which is book 1 in the Aurelia Rider series and is part of the Kate Daniels World series as well. This was a 2021 release that I gave 4.5 out of 5 stars, and it follows a character who we met in the Kate Daniels series called Julie. Julie was an orphan that Kate adopted and took under her wing. Julie has the ability to sense people's magic abilities, or she did in the Kate Daniels series. And at the end of that series, Julie left Atlanta and travelled on her own. And now she has returned 8 years later and she has a different face, she has new powers and a new mission. And she can't let anyone that she knew in her old life know that she's back in Atlanta because she is trying to protect her adopted mother Kate from a magical prophecy. The whole thing was just such a delight to revisit this world. Julie is a fantastic character. I loved being back in this world. I love the Kate Daniels world. I just think it is so much fun, and I was just so delighted whenever characters turned up. So some of the side characters, if you're familiar with the Kate Daniels world, who pop up pretty early on, you have Ascanio, Barabbas pops up, Christopher pops up. Christopher and Barabbas have a daughter, which I want to know more about, like what's going on there. Of course you have Derek, and I was just so thrilled with what actually happened in the story. I will need to do a reread, hopefully soon, because I think there's a lot of things that I missed because I was just so excited about reading. I am rereading the Kate Daniels series. I just decided on a whim that that's what I'm going to do, and then I will reread Blood Heir as soon as I finish the last book in the Kate Daniels series. So stay tuned. Then I read 2 volumes of Fire in His Fingertips by Kawano Tanishi. This is a very adult manga. Like, it came sealed, so it's very graphic. Be aware of that going into it. You see everything. But it is the story of Ryo and Suma, and they have been friends since childhood. Suma is a firefighter and has a reputation as a bit of a playboy, and Ryo is trying to set him up with someone. However, one night there is a fire in Ryo's apartment and Suma rescues her and lets her stay in his apartment, and it becomes rapidly apparent that Suma is very interested in Ryo. I will say, while reading this story, at first I was a little bit concerned about consent and power dynamics in the story. However, by the time you get into the second book and you see them actually trying to work at possibly having a relationship, it does become very sweet. But yes, it's very graphic. So thank you to Shay and to Tamika, because I read this because of them. Then I read a really quick paranormal romance novella. This one was called Taste, a vampire quickie novella, and this one was by Nikki Clark. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and it was the story of Lee, who is a nearly 200-year-old vampire, and she does not know who turned her, and she desperately wants companionship and someone to share her life with. And she'd also like the ability to have good sex as well, and that's part of the story. Having been unable to find the right partner, she decides that she is going to create one, and then things start to go awry in her plan. And it was a really fun, really interesting story. And I like the little nods to things that have happened throughout history, particularly when she finds the right partner. I also read Across the Green Grass Fields by Seanan McGuire. This is the 6th book in the Wayward Children series, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I have to say, I wasn't disappointed with this book, but I found it very different to the other ones. So if you're unfamiliar with the Wayward Children series, it is about children who go through portal doorways into worlds that best suit their personality. This story does not have any connections to the characters in the previous 5 books, so it does make it a really good entry point for anyone who has not started the series, and I think it does work really, really well. Because I am so familiar with the series and I love all the characters that we've met so far, I was a bit sad I didn't see them in this book. But this is the story of Regan, who we find out is intersex, and she ends up stepping through a door that asks her to be sure before she steps through. And as she goes through this doorway, she finds herself in the Hooflands, which is a world that is full of magical creatures who are all equine in nature, so to speak. And she ends up living with a herd of centaurs who farm unicorns. In this world, whenever a human enters the Hooflands, it is believed that the human is there because some great change or upheaval is going to happen, and that the human will be the hero to help the Hooflands deal with that change. However, as the story goes on, Regan discovers that not all heroes are the heroes from stories back home, and that the quests that these heroes go on are not always as they appear. This one felt like a really quiet sort of story, and it built up to an ending that I don't think quite delivered on its promise. But I did love the world building. I did love the idea of this magical equine based world. But yeah, something for me was just missing. And I hate saying that because I love this series and I did enjoy the book. But overall, I don't know if it's one of my favorites of the series. I also read a book that completed one of my Read Digital challenges, which was to read a book with my favorite drink, and that was The Love Bet by G.L. Thomas. This is a book that comes with a lot of trigger warnings, and I do have a review already on my blog, so I'll leave a link to that down below so that you can check it out. Some of the biggest trigger warnings though are toxic masculinity and things related to that, also toxic families and toxic relationships, as well as colorism and anti-blackness. So be aware of that going into it. But the main character is a black woman, and she talks about how she deals with a lot of these things throughout the story. It is the story of Luz de los Santos, who is the director of the sex and relationship column for Modern Magazine, which is a contemporary women's magazine. She usually loves her job, however, she's just been assigned an article to research and complete for their February love issue around the idea of, can you fall in love with someone by the 3rd time you sleep with them? She's not one for commitment. She's quite happy to have one-off encounters with people and call it good. However, she needs to actually research this for her article. And as a result, she ends up going to a speed dating event, trying to find someone who can be the second half of her experiment. And she ends up being matched up with Evan, who she dated in high school, and they have a rocky past. However, Evan really, really likes Luz, and once he finds out about her experiment and why she's even at the speed dating event, he offers to be her experiment partner, and he's convinced that he can rekindle the love that they had when they were kids. Now, I really liked this story because I think it dealt with a lot of hard-hitting issues, and it dealt with them in a way that felt very real and very natural. Luz is quite capable of calling out things that she sees as problematic, so we get flashbacks to when they were kids, and she sees the toxic masculinity behavior that Evan is presenting because he doesn't know any better, and she calls him on it. And as a result, one of the things that I really liked about Evan as a character is that he actually listens and he grows as a character as a result. And we can see that in his adult life as well, because he has applied a lot of the things that he learned from Luz to everything that he does. He doesn't always necessarily react in the best way, but he always does come back to it, listens, and then tries to learn from it, which I think is great to see in a character. Luz also deals with a lot of things within her family. The family dynamic is not always great. She's fine with her mother. However, when her mum's sisters get together, there's quite often some toxic relationships that are happening in there, and one of her aunts is a real struggle to deal with. The two things that I struggled with in this book was the pacing of the book, because initially we start jumping forwards and backwards in time as we get past Evan and Luz and present day Evan and Luz. Eventually that got a little bit old, just for my tastes. It was okay at the beginning because it set everything up and the stories paralleled each other, but as it got further along, a lot of that information about their past we'd already gotten through discussions in their present day. And the other thing that bothered me was that this whole premise was based around the fact that Luz had to write an article, and we don't really get much about that except at the very beginning when she set the assignment, and at the very end when we find out that it has been completed. I would have really liked to have seen how that article progressed, particularly as Luz and Evan's relationship progressed. And that's fine, that was the choice of the authors, but I thought it would have been really cool to have a bit more of that woven through the story, because I think that was a really fascinating concept. I ended up giving the Love Bet 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I would be very interested in reading other books by G.L. Thomas as well. And then the last two books that I read this week were the first two books in the Kate Daniels series, because I told you that I'm doing a reread. We have Magic Bites and Magic Burns. I gave Magic Bites 4 out of 5 stars on reread and Magic Burns 4.5 on reread. If you're unfamiliar with the series, the Kate Daniels world is set in an alternate, slightly dystopian-like Atlanta, in a world that is deeply affected by magic. There are constantly waves of high magic, and then also times when magic is not highly present, and that's a time when tech survives. So magic and tech have a real issue existing and working in tandem with one another, and so this causes the people in this world to have to adapt to both styles of living constantly, because they can never tell when magic is going to be up or when magic is going to be down. Kate Daniels starts off as a mercenary. She works for the Mercenaries Guild, and it is her job to go out and to deal with any magical creatures or situations that occur within her territory area. And in the first book, she finds out that her guardian, Greg, and Greg was a member of the Order of the Knights of Merciful Aid, and she finds herself being almost deputized to investigate his death, and this means that she ends up crossing paths with all of the different magical groups within the city, from the Pack, who are the Shifters, to the People, who are the Vampire Guild, and everything in between. It is a really fun world. Book 1 is very heavy on world building. However, on reread, and this is the third time that I've read it, I actually really enjoyed book 1. It really doesn't focus on any of the relationship stuff between the characters. It's almost like a pilot episode of a TV show where you get a sample of just about everything, and I really liked that. After reading Blood Heir, it was just great to go back to Kate Daniels and just to sink into a world that I knew really well. So I will be continuing my reread. The very first time that I read this series, I think I managed to binge all of the novels, which there are 11 of them. No, 12. There are 12 of them because there's 2 side novels, and a stack of the novellas in about, oh, I don't know, a week and a half, 2 weeks. And I'm probably going to try and do the same again. So apologies if next week's Books Beside My Bed video is all Kate Daniels. Those are all the physical books that I read this week, and there's a whole stack of ebooks as well that I read. It was a good reading week. I enjoyed myself. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books. If you haven't and you're more interested in more details, I have left all of the links to them on Goodreads so that you can check them out. Otherwise, feel free to let me know what you have been reading and enjoying in the last 7 days. If you would like to follow me, all my social media links are down below. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you are staying safe and healthy, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.